Millionaire bride abandoned at the altar and married a beggar. What happens next? Catherine Miller. Harrison was holding the bouquet of white roses with trembling hands when she realized something was wrong. The groom should have arrived 15 minutes ago, but the side door of the church remained closed while the 400 guests began whispering uneasily in the pews of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. That was when she saw Alistair Sterling running through the back door of the church, still wearing his tuxedo, but with a desperate expression on his face. He didn't stop to explain, just shouted something about not being able to do this before disappearing through the side garden, leaving behind a humiliated bride and a shocked crowd of New York City's high society. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Catherine's heels as she slowly descended the steps of the altar. Her mother, Eleanor Harrison, was as pale as a ghost in the front row, while her father, businessman Gregory Miller, seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The murmurs turned into louder conversations, and some guests were already starting to get up, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Catherine felt her blood boil in her veins. 32 years old, owner of a cosmetics company that made millions, with a business degree from the Wharton School, and she was being humiliated like this in front of all of New York City's elite. The French lace dress that had cost over $15,000 now felt heavy as useless armor. That was when her eyes landed on a figure that shouldn't have been there. Behind the last marble column of the church, half hidden in the shadows, stood a man who appeared to be around 50 years old. His grey hair was disheveled, his face unshaven, and his clothes looked like they hadn't seen a washing machine in weeks. He was watching the whole scene with an expression of genuine compassion, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. Something inside Catherine simply snapped. Maybe it was the anger, maybe it was the desperation, or maybe it was an explosive mixture of both. Without thinking twice, she pointed her finger at the man and shouted with all the strength in her lungs, "You there! Yes, you! Come here!" The man looked around, confused, thinking she was talking to someone else. But when he realized all eyes were on him, his face showed pure panic. "Me?" he stammered, in a hoarse but polite voice. "That's right. Get over here right now," Catherine insisted, taking a few more steps down toward him. The guests were in a state of absolute shock. No one could understand what was happening. The priest, Reverend Thomas Thompson, a 70-year-old man who had known the Miller family for decades, stood completely paralyzed at the altar, not knowing how to react to the situation. The man hesitated for a few seconds, but something in Catherine's determined gaze convinced him to step out from behind the column. He walked slowly down the center aisle of the church with unsteady steps, while all the guests turned to watch him with a mixture of horror and curiosity. When he got close to the altar, Catherine stared directly into his eyes. There was a deep intelligence in those brown eyes, a dignity that contrasted with his ragged appearance. "What's your name?" she asked in a voice that echoed throughout the church. Christopher Thompson Miller," he answered, visibly nervous. "Christopher, will you marry me?" The question landed like a bomb in the room. Eleanor Harrison let out a strangled sound and fanned herself furiously with the ceremony program. Gregory Miller stood up from his pew as if he were going to intervene, but froze when he saw the determination on his daughter's face. Christopher blinked several times as if he couldn't process what he was hearing. "Ma'am, I don't understand." "It's a simple question," Catherine interrupted, sliding her engagement ring off her finger and tossing it onto the marble floor with a metallic clatter that echoed through the entire church. "Do you agree to marry me right here and now?" The man looked around, seeing hundreds of shocked faces turned toward him. Some guests were already whispering things like, "She's lost her mind and someone needs to do something." But when his eyes returned to Catherine, he saw something that touched him deeply. A wounded woman who was taking control of her own life, the only way she could imagine at that moment. I accept," he said, in a voice that grew firmer with each word. Father Thomas finally reacted, taking a few steps down from the altar with his arms outstretched. "My daughter, this is madness. You can't marry a stranger. Let's talk. Let's talk." "Father Thomas," Catherine interrupted him, using the firm tone she used in business meetings, "are you going to officiate this wedding, or will I need to find another priest?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The priest looked desperately at Gregory Miller, as if asking for an intervention, but the businessman stood paralyzed, completely at a loss for how to handle such an unusual situation. Eleanor had begun to cry silently, hiding her face in her hands. "Daughter!" Father Thomas tried once more. "This is no joke. Matrimony is a sacred sacrament." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Catherine replied, taking Christopher's hand. "This man had the decency to stay here and show compassion when that coward ran off. That's already more than many people from good families can offer." Christopher was surprised by the firmness of Catherine's handshake. Her hands were soft, well cared for, but there was real strength in them. He could feel her trembling, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly, just for her to hear. "Absolutely," she answered, looking directly into his eyes. Father Thomas realized there was no argument that would change Catherine's mind at that moment. With a deep sigh and a silent prayer, he gestured for them to come up to the altar. "May God forgive us," the priest murmured, opening the prayer book. The ceremony that followed was the strangest in the history of that century-old cathedral. Christopher repeated the vows with a touching seriousness, as if he truly understood the weight of what was happening. Catherine spoke her words with iron determination, every syllable charged with defiance against everyone who doubted her decision. When Father Thomas asked if there was any impediment to the marriage, at least 10 people in the church seemed ready to speak, but Catherine's fierce look silenced them all. The rings were a problem. Christopher obviously didn't have one, so Father Thomas improvised with a simple ring he wore on his pinky finger. Catherine placed the ring that was meant for Alistair on Christopher's finger, a white gold ring with diamonds that cost more than many people earned in a year. "By the powers vested in me," Father Thomas said, his voice slightly trembling, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. May God bless this union." The kiss was soft, almost hesitant. Christopher clearly didn't want to presume anything, and Catherine, despite all her determination, was nervous. It was more a touch of lips than an actual kiss, but it was enough to officially seal the most unusual marriage in the history of New York City. What happened next was chaotic. Eleanor Harrison fainted and had to be carried out of the church by 2 guests. Gregory Miller finally found his voice and began shouting at his daughter, calling her irresponsible and saying she had destroyed the family. Half the guests left the church in silence, too embarrassed to say anything. The other half stayed to watch the drama unfold. "Catherine, you've completely lost your mind!" Gregory shouted, climbing the altar steps. "This marriage is null and void. I'm filing the papers first thing tomorrow." "Dad, it was performed by an ordained priest in the presence of 400 witnesses with all the paperwork in order," Catherine answered calmly. "It's valid under any civil or religious law." Christopher stood quietly beside her, clearly uncomfortable with the whole argument but making no move to step away. There was something about him that suggested he was used to difficult situations. "And you?" Gregory turned to Christopher furiously. "How much do you want? What's your price to disappear from my daughter's life?" Christopher's face hardened for the first time since he had been called to the altar. "Sir, I may not have much in life, but my dignity is not for sale," he said, with a firmness that surprised everyone. "Your daughter asked me to marry her and I accepted. Now we're husband and wife and I'm going to honor that commitment." Catherine looked at him with a mixture of surprise and admiration. There was a nobility in that man that contrasted completely with his appearance. The argument went on for a few more minutes, but Catherine stood her ground. Eventually, the remaining guests left, making nasty remarks in the aisles about how the Miller family had completely lost control of their daughter. Gregory and 2 other relatives carried Eleanor, who was still unconscious, to the car. When the church was finally empty, only Catherine, Christopher, and Father Thomas remained. The priest looked at the newlyweds with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "My child," he said softly, "I hope you know what you're doing. Marriage is not something that is easily undone." "I know, Father Thomas," Catherine replied, "and thank you for performing the ceremony." Father Thomas nodded and withdrew, leaving the two alone in the empty church. The silence that followed was charged with tension and uncertainty. "So," Christopher said finally, "what do we do now?" Catherine looked around the church, which half an hour earlier had been decorated for what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. Now it looked like a battlefield after a war. "Honestly, I don't know," she admitted. "I didn't think much beyond showing everyone that I'm not a victim." "And you did," Christopher said with a half-smile. "No one's going to forget this day anytime soon." For the first time since Alistair had fled, Catherine genuinely smiled. There was something refreshing about Christopher's simplicity after years of dealing with the complexity and falseness of the corporate world. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" she asked. "I have a place," he replied vaguely. "And you? I imagine your family won't welcome you with open arms after this." Catherine hadn't even thought about that. She lived in an apartment her parents had given her in Manhattan, but after the scandal she had just caused, she wasn't sure she'd be welcome at home. "Let's find out together," she said, offering him her arm. Christopher hesitated for a moment, looking at his dirty clothes in contrast with Catherine's luxurious wedding dress. "Are you sure? I don't belong in your world." "After what just happened," Catherine said, "I'm not sure I belong in my own world." They left the church together, under the curious gaze of some passers-by who recognized Catherine from the society magazines. Within a few hours, the photos would be all over the country's gossip sites. The car that was supposed to take Catherine and Alistair to the wedding reception was still waiting outside. The driver, Mr. Gerald, a man who had worked for the family for 15 years, seemed completely at a loss about the situation. "Mrs. Miller," he said as she approached, "I don't know what to do. Your father told me to wait for you, but—" "It's all right, Mr. Gerald," Catherine said. "This is Christopher, my husband. We're going home." Mr. Gerald looked at Christopher with an expression of barely concealed shock, but opened the door of the black Cadillac Escalade without asking questions. During his 15 years working for the Miller family, he had learned that it was better not to question the family's decisions, no matter how strange they might seem. During the drive to Catherine's apartment in the Upper East Side, they remained silent. Christopher watched the bustling streets of New York City through the window, while Catherine nervously fiddled with the hem of her wedding dress. The reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in. She had married a complete stranger. She knew nothing about him except his name. She didn't know where he lived, how he made a living, whether he had family, whether he had addictions, whether he was dangerous. No matter how determined she was to show that she wasn't a victim, she was beginning to realize that she might have made the most reckless decision of her life. As if sensing her anxiety, Christopher turned to her. "Look, I understand if you want to back out. I can disappear from your life as if nothing had happened." "No," Catherine said quickly. "I made a commitment in front of God and 400 people. I'm not backing out." "Even though you know nothing about me?" Catherine studied him for a moment. There was something in his eyes that reassured her, an honesty she rarely saw in the business world. "Then tell me about yourself." Christopher took a deep breath, as if preparing for a difficult confession. "My name is Christopher Thompson Miller. I'm 52 years old. I'm a civil engineer with a degree from Columbia University. I've spent the last 3 years living on the streets." Catherine blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected him to have a degree, much less in a respectable profession. "What do you mean, living on the streets?" "It's a long story," Christopher said, looking out the window again. "I had a construction company with my business partner, Richard Brooks. 15 years building a solid reputation, doing residential and commercial projects, until I found out he was embezzling money from clients to fuel a gambling addiction." His voice grew harsher as he continued. "When I confronted him, Richard had already saddled our company with debts of nearly $500,000. He forged my signature on contracts, used my name on bank loans. When everything came to light, I lost everything. The company, my house, my reputation. No one wanted to hire me because they thought I was involved in the scheme." Catherine listened in silence, beginning to understand why there was such a deep dignity in Christopher's gestures. "And your family?" "My wife left me when the debts surfaced. She took our 2 children to live with her mother in Chicago. She said she couldn't live with the shame. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago. The car stopped in front of Catherine's building, a luxurious 20-story building with a 24-hour doorman. The doorman, Mr. John, greeted Catherine as always, but his eyes widened when he saw Christopher getting out of the car behind her, still dressed in his tattered clothes. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller," Mr. John said, trying to maintain his professional composure. "How was the wedding?" "It was interesting, Mr. John. This is Christopher, my husband." The doorman swallowed hard and greeted Christopher politely, although his confusion was obvious. In the elevator, Catherine noticed that Christopher was visibly uncomfortable with the luxury around him. His eyes swept over the mirrors and marble finishes with the look of someone unaccustomed to that kind of surroundings. "Why were you at the church?" she asked, as they rode up to the 15th floor. Christopher hesitated. I sometimes go into churches when it's cold. It's one of the few places where they don't kick me out. It was raining this morning, so I went inside to take shelter. When I saw there was going to be a wedding, I tried to leave quietly, but then all that chaos started with your fiancé running away." "And why did you stay?" "Honestly," Christopher looked at her, "because I recognized the pain on your face. I've been through it. The feeling of having your life turned upside down in front of everyone, of being publicly humiliated. I knew how you were feeling." The elevator doors opened and they stepped into Catherine's apartment. It was spacious and elegantly decorated, with a panoramic view of the city. Christopher stood at the entrance, clearly intimidated. "You can come in," Catherine said softly. "Technically, this is your home now, too." Christopher took a few hesitant steps into the apartment, taking in the designer furniture and the artwork on the walls. Everything there cost more than he used to earn in years, back when he still had his company. Catherine headed to the bedroom to change, leaving Christopher alone in the living room. He sat carefully on the edge of the leather sofa, as if afraid of getting it dirty. His mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened. A few hours ago, he was an anonymous, homeless man. Now he was married to one of the richest women in New York City. When Catherine came back, she had traded her wedding dress for a pair of jeans and a simple blouse. Even dressed casually, it was impossible not to notice her natural beauty and the elegance in her movements. "You must be hungry," she said, walking to the refrigerator. Well, to be honest, I don't have much. I always eat out or order delivery." "Don't worry about me," Christopher said. "I'm used to not eating much." Catherine stopped and looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. He was clearly malnourished, his facial bones were prominent, and his clothes were far too loose. A wave of guilt washed over her. She had used that man to prove something to herself without really considering his situation. "Christopher, when was the last time you took a hot shower and had a decent meal?" He thought for a moment. "A hot shower? About 4 months ago, when I managed to use the shower at a shelter. A decent meal. Maybe 6 months." Catherine felt her stomach tighten. She had wasted more money on a single meal than Christopher had seen in months. "Go take a shower," she said firmly. "The bathroom is that way. There are clean towels in the cabinet. I'll order food." "I can't." "Christopher, we're married. That means we take care of each other. Go." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded and headed to the bathroom. Catherine heard the sound of running water and realized she had no idea what kind of food he liked. She decided to order a variety of dishes from a Brazilian restaurant she used to frequent. While waiting for the food to arrive, she turned on her computer and began looking up Christopher Thompson Miller. She found several articles about the scandal involving his company. The articles painted a picture of a man who had been genuinely betrayed by his business partner. There were testimonials from clients confirming that Christopher had always been honest and competent in his work. One article in particular caught her attention. It was an interview with Richard Brooks, conducted from the prison where he was serving time for fraud. He admitted to forging Christopher's signature on multiple documents and took full responsibility for the collapse of the company. Christopher had been completely cleared of any crime, but the damage to his reputation was already done. When Christopher came out of the bathroom, Catherine barely recognized him. Clean and shaven, it was clear he was truly an attractive man. His grey hair, now combed, gave him a distinguished air. He had put on a robe he'd found in the bathroom. "I feel human again," he said with a shy smile. "Thank you." "The food should be here any minute," Catherine said. "Christopher, I looked into your company's case. I'm sorry for what you went through." His smile faded. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to understand, and now I understand why you reacted with such dignity when my father tried to bribe you. You already lost everything once because of someone else's dishonesty." Christopher sat down on the couch, this time more relaxed. The hardest part wasn't losing the money or the house. It was seeing how people changed toward me. Friends of decades would cross the street to avoid having to greet me. Clients I'd known since I started in the profession spread rumors about me. Within a few months, I went from a respected businessman to a social pariah. "And your ex-wife?" Samantha always cared a lot about appearances. When the scandal broke, she simply couldn't handle it. She said the kids were being discriminated against at school, that she couldn't leave the house without being judged. In the end, she blamed me for not noticing what Richard was doing. Catherine could hear the pain in his voice, even 3 years later. "Do you have contact with your kids?" Matthew is 22, finishing engineering at Northwestern. Jennifer is 19, studying psychology. At first they'd call behind their mother's back, but it's hard to maintain a relationship when you don't even have a landline. It's been over a year since I last spoke to them. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the food. Catherine brought the bags to the kitchen table and started taking out the containers. There was smoked brisket and ribs, buffalo wings, glazed donuts, salad, apple pie, and several other specialties. Christopher stared at the amount of food with wide eyes. "This is enough for an army." "I didn't know what you liked," Catherine said, suddenly embarrassed by the abundance. "You can eat whatever you want." They sat at the table, and Christopher began to eat slowly, savoring every bite as if it were his last. Catherine noticed he was holding back to avoid looking desperate, but it was obvious he was starving. "Go ahead and eat as much as you want," she said softly. "There's plenty of food." "Thank you," he said between bites. "It's been a while since I had something so delicious." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Catherine watched Christopher discreetly, noticing how he appreciated every flavor, how his features relaxed with each passing minute. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course." "Why did you agree to marry me? A complete stranger could have dangerous hidden motives." Christopher stopped eating and looked directly at her. "Because I saw a brave person taking control of her own life. You could have run away crying, could have cancelled everything and hidden at home. But you chose to face the humiliation head-on. I admire that." "But you don't know me. I could be a terrible person." "That's true," he admitted. "But what did I have to lose? My life was already at rock bottom. If it goes wrong, I go back to where I was. If it goes right... If it goes right... What?" Christopher hesitated, as if he didn't want to admit his hopes. "If it goes right, maybe I'll have a chance to start over, to be useful again, to have a family." The simplicity and honesty of his answer touched Catherine deeply. She was so used to people who always had hidden motives, who always wanted something from her, that Christopher's sincerity was refreshing. "And what do you expect from this marriage?" he asked. Catherine thought for a moment. "Honestly, I hope to prove to myself that I can make my own decisions, that I don't have to follow the script my family wrote for my life, that I can be happy without depending on anyone's approval." "And what if your family cuts ties with you? Then at least I'll know where they truly stand. If their love for me is conditional on my appropriate behavior, then it's not real love." Christopher nodded, understanding the feeling completely. "And your company?" "My company is mine. I built it from scratch, with my own sweat. My parents invested in the beginning, but I paid them back years ago. They can't take that away from me." After dinner, they settled in the living room. The initial tension had eased, but there was still an obvious awkwardness. They were two strangers trying to navigate a completely unprecedented situation. "Where were you sleeping?" Catherine asked. "There's a place under the Brooklyn Bridge where some of us take shelter. It's not much, but it's dry when it rains." Catherine tried to imagine Christopher sleeping on the street and felt a lump in her throat. "Well, now you have a bed. The guest room is ready." "Thank you," Christopher said. "Catherine, I want you to know that I have no expectations, intimate, regarding this marriage. I understand it was an impulsive decision motivated by anger." "I appreciate that," she said, feeling more relaxed. "Let's see how things develop." That night, Catherine lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom. She could hear Christopher tossing and turning in the next room, probably also unable to sleep. What had she done? She had married a stranger out of pride and anger, and now her phone had rung incessantly all night. Messages from friends, relatives, journalists, all wanting to know what had happened at the church. She had turned off the phone after reading a few messages that ranged from genuine concern to morbid curiosity. In the next room, Christopher was also awake. For the first time in 3 years, he was in a real bed with clean sheets and a soft pillow. But he couldn't stop thinking about whether he had made the right decision. Catherine seemed sincere, but he knew reality could be different once the initial shock wore off. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, Catherine woke up to the smell of coffee being brewed. She went downstairs and found Christopher in the kitchen, already wearing the same clothes from the day before, preparing a simple breakfast with the ingredients he had found in the pantry. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "I hope you don't mind. I'm used to waking up early." "No, it's great," Catherine said, surprised. It had been years since someone had made breakfast for her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in the last 3 years," he admitted. "And you?" "To be honest, I've been thinking about what we're going to do now. I have a company to run. You need clothes, updated documents, a life." Christopher poured her coffee into one of the porcelain cups he had found in the cabinet. "I don't want to be a burden to you, Catherine. If you give me a few days to get myself together, I can look for work and—" "Christopher, we're married. That means we face things together. First, let's take care of your basic situation. Then we'll see how to fit our lives together." The house phone rang. It was Eleanor, Catherine's mother, her voice still trembling from the day before. "Catherine, my daughter, please tell me yesterday was all a nightmare." "Good morning, Mother. How are you feeling?" "How am I feeling? Catherine, you married a beggar. In front of all of New York City. How do you think I'm feeling?" "Mum, Christopher is not a beggar. He's an engineer. He was the victim of a scam, and now he's my husband." "Catherine, you need to have this marriage annulled immediately, before it becomes national news. We can still control the damage if we act quickly." "I'm not annulling anything, Mum. So you're choosing this stranger over your own family?" Catherine looked at Christopher, who was clearly uncomfortable listening to the conversation. "I'm choosing my own life, Mom. I hope you understand one day." Eleanor hung up the phone forcefully. Catherine sighed and turned to Christopher. "I'm sorry you have to go through this. Catherine, if you want to reconsider, stop saying that. I've made a decision and I'm going to honor it." They spent the morning buying clothes for Christopher. Catherine took him to a department store where they bought the basics, some shirts, pants, shoes, underwear. Christopher resisted at first, saying he couldn't accept charity, but Catherine argued that it was an investment in his appearance to look for work. In the store, the saleswomen looked at them with barely disguised curiosity. The story of the church wedding had already started circulating on social media, and some recognized Catherine from the photos going around. "Catherine?" one of the saleswomen asked hesitantly. "You're the one who—" "Yes, that's me. This is my husband, Christopher. We're looking for clothes for him." The saleswoman looked at Christopher with a mix of disbelief and curiosity, but maintained her professional composure. After shopping, they went to an accounting office where Christopher had to update his documents and resolve pending issues related to the bankruptcy of his former company. The accountant, Mr. Mark, a 60-year-old man who had known Christopher since his prosperous days, was visibly surprised to see him. "Christopher, man, where have you been? We haven't seen you in years." "It's a long story, Mark. I need to take care of some legal matters. This is my wife, Catherine." Mr. Mark greeted Catherine politely, but she could see the confusion in his eyes. The social class difference between her and Christopher was obvious. During the document update process, it became clear that Christopher had literally lost everything. His bank account had been seized to pay the company's debts, his house had been auctioned off, even his professional engineering license had been temporarily suspended due to the legal proceedings. "The good news," Mr. Mark said, "is that you've been completely cleared. The suspension of your license was reversed 6 months ago. You can go back to working as an engineer anytime." Christopher seemed relieved. Catherine hadn't realized how worried he was about that. On the way back home, they stopped at a cafe. Catherine wanted to talk about the future without the distractions of home. "Now that you can work again, what do you want to do?" she asked. "Honestly, I want to get back into construction. It's what I do best. But it's going to be hard to find a job. Even cleared, my reputation is still tarnished. What if I hired you?" Christopher looked at her surprised. "Hire me to do what?" "My cosmetics company is growing. I need to expand our factory and maybe open new retail locations. I could use the services of a civil engineer." "Catherine, I can't accept you creating a job for me just because we're married. It's not charity, Christopher. It's business. I researched your previous work. You have a reputation for being excellent at what you do. I'd be lucky to hire you." Christopher thought for a moment. "If it's a real professional contract with a market-rate salary and clear expectations, I'll accept." "Great. We can start on Monday." That afternoon, they returned to the apartment and found Gregory Miller waiting in the lobby. Catherine's father was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth like a caged lion. "Catherine, we need to talk, now." "Dad, you know Christopher, my husband." Gregory didn't even look at Christopher. "Cut the nonsense, Catherine. This circus has gone on long enough. You're going to have this marriage annulled today, and we're going to pretend none of this ever happened." "I'm not annulling anything. Don't you understand this is destroying our family? Your mother is depressed, the business is being affected, our friends don't know how to talk to us. Dad, this is about you and your appearances, not about me. This is about responsibility. You have obligations to this family." Christopher, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, Catherine is an adult woman with the right to make her own choices. You have no right to speak in this conversation." Gregory turned to Christopher angrily. "You took advantage of my daughter in a moment of vulnerability." "Dad," Catherine intervened, "Christopher didn't do anything except accept my marriage proposal. If anyone took advantage of anyone, it was me taking advantage of his situation." "What situation? He's a beggar. He's a qualified engineer who went through hard times, just like anyone could." The argument continued for a few more minutes, with Gregory alternating between threats, pleas, and insults. Christopher remained calm the entire time, which seemed to irritate Gregory even more. Finally, Gregory played the card he'd been holding. "If you don't annul this marriage, I'll cut off your entire inheritance. You won't see a cent of this family's money." "That's fine, Dad. I never needed your money to be happy. And I'm withdrawing my investment from your company. I want back every cent I put into the business." Catherine felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. Although she had paid off the initial loans, her father still held a 30% stake in the company. If he sold his shares or created legal problems, he could seriously complicate the business. "It's your choice, Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I'm not changing my mind." Gregory looked at his daughter for a long moment, as if he couldn't believe the situation. Finally, he turned and left without saying another word. Christopher gently touched Catherine's arm. "Are you sure you want to go through this because of me?" "It's not because of you, Christopher. It's because of me. It's the first time in my life that I'm making a decision without worrying about other people's approval." But when they got to the apartment, Catherine let herself cry for the first time since the day before. Christopher wasn't sure what to do, so he simply sat beside her on the sofa and offered his silent presence. "I'm sorry I've complicated your life like this," he said finally. "You didn't complicate anything. My life was already complicated. I just didn't want to admit it. At least now things are clear." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about their lives, their fears, their dreams. Christopher told her about the joy he felt building things, about how rewarding it was to see an idea on paper turn into a real structure. Catherine talked about how she had built her company from the ground up, about the difficulties of being a woman in the business world, about how she sometimes felt trapped between her family's expectations and her own desires. When night fell, they ordered Chinese food and ate while watching a movie on TV. It was strange but comfortable, as if they were old friends instead of newlyweds who were strangers. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Christopher said during a break in the movie. "Sure." "Why have you never been married before? A woman like you must have had plenty of opportunities." Catherine thought for a moment. "Because I never found someone who wanted me for who I really am. There was always interest in my money, or the connection with my family, or what I could do for their careers. Alistair was no different. Our engagement was practically arranged by our parents to unite two influential families." "Did you love him?" "I thought I did, but I think I was in love with the idea of marriage, not with him specifically. When he ran away, what hurt the most was the humiliation, not losing him. And now, aren't you afraid you married someone for equally questionable reasons?" Catherine looked directly at him. "Do you want anything from me besides an honest fresh start in life?" "No." "Then that's more honest than any relationship I've ever had." On Monday, Catherine took Christopher to see her company. Pure Essence Corp was a cosmetics company she had founded 10 years earlier, specializing in natural and sustainable products. The factory was located in an industrial area of Newark and employed about 100 people. When they arrived, the employees looked at Christopher with curiosity. The news of the marriage had spread, and although no one made direct comments, it was obvious that everyone was speculating about the situation. Alison Foster, Catherine's administrative manager and one of the few people she completely trusted, pulled her aside as soon as they arrived. "Kat, you need to tell me what's going on. The press won't stop calling. Your parents sent strange messages, and now you show up with a man who's supposedly your husband." "It's a long story, Alison. But yes, Christopher is my husband, and I'm going to hire him as an engineering consultant for our expansion." "Kat, with all due respect, have you lost your mind?" "Maybe. But I need you to trust me, please." Alison had known Catherine for 8 years and could tell when she was determined about something. Even though she found the whole situation strange, she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Prepare a consulting contract for Christopher. Let's start with a pilot project, the expansion of our production area. If it works out, we can formalize something more permanent." Christopher spent the day touring the factory facilities, analyzing the available spaces, and talking with the supervisors about the expansion needs. Catherine watched him work and was impressed by his competence. He asked smart questions, took detailed notes, and clearly understood what he was seeing. "He seems to know what he's doing," Alison commented when they were alone. "I know, that's why I hired him." "Kat, can I ask you a question? Did you really marry him, or is this some kind of crazy marketing strategy?" "It's a real marriage, Alison, registered at the courthouse, officiated by a priest with witnesses." "But why?" Catherine sighed. "Because for the first time in my life I did something completely on my own, without weighing costs and benefits, without caring what others thought, without following a pre-established plan. And you know what? It was liberating. And if it goes wrong, then it'll go wrong. But at least I'll know it was my choice." During the week, Christopher worked on developing a preliminary plan for the factory expansion. He proposed a smart solution that maximized the available space without compromising operational efficiency. His presentation to the management team was professional and well-grounded. "He's good," Alison admitted to Catherine after the presentation. "Regardless of this whole strange marriage situation, he really knows his stuff. I knew you'd like him professionally. Christopher may have lost everything, but he didn't lose his competence." At home, they were developing a comfortable routine. Christopher woke up early and made breakfast. Catherine handled dinner. They watched television together at night, talked about work, and were gradually getting to know each other better. Christopher discovered that Catherine was funnier and more relaxed at home than she seemed in the business world. She discovered that he was intellectually curious, well-read, and had interesting opinions on a variety of subjects. But not everything was smooth sailing. The press had started covering the story, portraying Catherine as an eccentric heiress who had married a homeless man on a whim. Some articles were sympathetic, framing the situation as romantic. Others were cruel, suggesting she had lost her mind or that Christopher was taking advantage of her. "Are you reading that?" Christopher asked on a Thursday morning, holding up a gossip magazine that described their marriage as the strangest wedding of the century. "I'm trying not to," Catherine replied, "but it's hard to ignore when everyone is talking about it." "Is it affecting your company?" "A little. Some clients made comments, but sales haven't dropped, so in the end, I think it's just curiosity." The phone rang. It was Alistair Sterling. "Catherine, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Alistair, we have nothing to discuss." "Please, let me explain why I ran. It's not what you think." Catherine looked at Christopher, who was clearly listening to the conversation. "Say what you have to say, now." "I can't talk over the phone. Can I come over?" "No." "If it's important, say it now or forget it." Alistair hesitated. "I was being blackmailed, Catherine. Someone had compromising photos of me and was threatening to release them if I married you. I ran to protect you from the scandal." Catherine almost laughed at the irony. "Alistair, did you see the scandal I created all on my own? I don't need your protection." "Catherine, I love you. I've always loved you. We can work this out. You can annul this crazy marriage and—" "Alistair, stop. I'm not annulling my marriage. Christopher is my husband and I'm happy with that decision." "You're happy? Seriously? With a homeless man?" "I'm happy with an honest, hard-working man who respects me and doesn't try to control me, something you never managed to be." Alistair hung up in anger. Christopher looked at Catherine with admiration. "You're an impressive woman," he said. "Why?" "Because you don't let anyone tell you how to live your life." That afternoon they received an unexpected visit. Matthew and Jennifer, Christopher's children, showed up at the apartment. Catherine recognized them from the photos Christopher had shown her, though they were visibly older now. "Dad?" Matthew said when Christopher opened the door, clearly surprised. "Matthew, Jennifer, what are you doing here?" "We saw online about your marriage," Jennifer said, looking at Catherine with curiosity. "We wanted to see if it was true." Christopher invited them in, visibly nervous. "This is Catherine, my wife. Catherine, these are my children, Matthew and Jennifer." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Catherine said, offering her hand. "Christopher talks about you a lot." Matthew, the older one, looked skeptical. Jennifer seemed more curious than judgmental. "Dad, did you really marry her?" Matthew asked directly. "Yes, son. We got married last Monday." "But why? I mean, isn't it strange? You barely know each other." Christopher looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "It's a long story. But basically, Catherine offered me a chance to start over, and I offered her the chance to make her own decisions." "And does Mom know?" Jennifer asked. "I haven't talked to her about it yet." "She's going to flip out," Matthew said. "Probably," Christopher admitted. They spent the afternoon talking. Catherine was impressed by the politeness and intelligence of the two young people. It was clear that Christopher had been a good father, even during the hard times. Matthew mentioned he was finishing his engineering degree and already had a job offer in Chicago. Jennifer was loving her psychology program and thinking about specializing in family therapy. "Dad, you seem better," Jennifer observed. "The last few times we talked, you seemed so lost." "I was lost," Christopher admitted. "But now I have hope again." "And you?" Matthew asked Catherine. "Why did you marry our dad? It's not for the money, because you clearly have more than enough." Catherine considered the question seriously. "Because your father is the first genuinely honest person I've met in a long time. At a moment when I felt completely disillusioned with the people around me, he showed compassion and dignity. That's rare." "But you barely know each other," Matthew insisted. "That's true. But getting to know someone isn't just about time. It's about character. And your father's character became clear to me very quickly." When the young people left, they promised to keep in more regular contact. Christopher was visibly moved by having seen his children. "Thank you," he said to Catherine. "For what?" "For being so kind to them. for not pretending we're a normal couple when it's obvious our situation is strange. Your children are wonderful people, Christopher. You did a good job as a father, even though I lost touch with them for over a year. Especially because of that. You stepped away so you wouldn't be a burden to them when you were struggling. That's real fatherly love. That night, they were watching television when the local news ran a story about them. The report was relatively balanced, showing both the unusual aspects of the story and the human side. The marriage that shocked New York City can be seen either as a modern fairy tale or as an impulsive act with unpredictable consequences, the reporter said. But one thing is certain: Catherine Miller Harrison and Christopher Thompson Miller are defying social conventions and creating their own definition of family. At least it wasn't completely negative, Catherine commented. It's strange being in the news, Christopher said. For the past 3 years I was invisible. Now I feel like everyone is watching my every move. Do you regret it? Christopher thought for a moment. No. As strange as all this attention is, I'd rather be here with you than where I was before. And you? Do you regret it? No, Catherine answered without hesitation. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living my own life. On Friday, they faced their first real test as a couple. Gregory Miller showed up at Catherine's office with a lawyer and documents to force Christopher's removal from the company. Catherine, either you remove that man from the company, or I'll exercise my rights as a partner to block any contract with him. Dad, Christopher was hired based on his professional competence. I don't care about his competence. I won't allow our company to be used to support your little marriage stunt. Gregory's lawyer, Mr. Harold Whitaker, a man in his 50s who had represented the family for decades, presented the documents. Ms. Miller, according to the partnership agreement, any hiring above a certain amount must be approved by both partners. Your father has the right to veto this hiring. Catherine read the documents carefully. Technically, the lawyer was correct. Very well, Dad. Then I'll buy your share of the company. With what money? You know my stake is worth at least $500,000 in the current market. I'll secure financing. Catherine, be realistic. No bank is going to finance a purchase of that amount based solely on your current income, especially with all this negative publicity surrounding you. Christopher, who had remained quiet throughout the entire discussion, finally spoke. Mr. Miller, may I suggest something? You have no place in this conversation. Actually, I do, because this discussion is happening because of me. Christopher turned to Catherine. Catherine, I'm renouncing the contract. I don't want to be a source of conflict between you and your family. Christopher, no. It's the right thing to do. I'll find work somewhere else. Gregory seemed satisfied, but Catherine was furious. No. Father, you want your share of the company? I'll give it to you, but I want everything documented. I'll pay back every cent you invested over the years with market interest, but when this is over, I don't want to have any more financial obligations to this family. Catherine, there's no way you can come up with that money. I'll find a way. Gregory looked at his daughter for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Mr. Harold will prepare the paperwork. You have 30 days to get the money, or our partnership stays as it is, with all the limitations that implies. After they left, Catherine collapsed into her chair. Christopher approached her carefully. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I didn't want this to happen. It's not your fault, Christopher. It's mine for letting my family control me for so long. But how are you going to come up with $500,000 in 30 days? Catherine took a deep breath. I'll take out a mortgage on my apartment. I'll use my savings, and I'll look for investors. Either way, I'll manage. And if you don't, then I'll have to accept that my father can control my company. But at least I tried. Christopher sat down beside her. Is there any way I can help? Unless you have $500,000 stashed away somewhere, there's not much you can do. Actually, Christopher said hesitantly, maybe there is. Catherine looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? Remember when I said I lost everything when my company went bankrupt? Yes. Well, I didn't lose literally everything. Before it all fell apart, I had set aside some money in my children's names for their education. It was an investment that wasn't in the company's name, so it wasn't affected by the legal proceedings. How much? $75,000. It's not much, but it could help. Catherine was stunned. Christopher, I can't accept that. That's your children's education. Matthew already has a guaranteed job, and Jennifer has a full scholarship at the university. Besides, if your company thrives, I can make up the money through my work. We're married, Catherine. Your problems are my problems. Catherine felt her eyes fill with tears. It was the first time in her life that someone was willing to sacrifice something truly important for her, without expecting anything in return. Christopher, You don't have to say anything, we'll figure this out together. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, they worked together developing a financial plan. Christopher showed surprising intelligence in business matters, offering valuable suggestions on how to approach potential investors. Have you ever thought about turning the company into a publicly traded corporation? He asked. You could sell shares to investors instead of seeking bank loans. I've thought about it a few times, but I always thought the process was too complicated. It's not as complicated as it seems. And considering the growth your company has had in recent years, you could probably attract interested investors. They spent the weekend researching options and reaching out to financial advisors. Christopher demonstrated solid knowledge of the capital markets, which surprised Catherine. How do you know so much about investing? She asked. When you own a construction company, you need to understand financing, the real estate market, profit projections. I learned out of necessity, but I ended up liking the financial side. On Monday, they had a meeting with Margaret Reed, a financial consultant specializing in small and medium-sized businesses. Margaret analyzed the numbers for Catherine's company and was impressed. Your company has excellent numbers, Catherine. Steady growth, good profit margins, differentiated products on the market. Getting investment shouldn't be a problem. The problem is the timeline, Catherine explained. I need the money in less than a month. That complicates things, but it's not impossible. I have some contacts who might be interested in a quick return investment. Margaret set up a series of meetings for the following week. Meanwhile, Christopher worked on a detailed presentation about the company's expansion potential, including growth projections and market analysis. You're good at this, Catherine commented when she saw the presentation he had prepared. Are you sure you were a civil engineer, not a business consultant? Construction is a lot about anticipating problems and planning solutions. It's not that different from planning business strategies. The meetings with investors started on Wednesday. The first was with Evelyn Vance, a 40-year-old businesswoman who had made a fortune investing in companies led by women. I like what I see, she said after the presentation. Your company has real potential, and your recent personal story suggests you're not afraid to make bold decisions. My recent personal story? Catherine asked. The marriage, of course. It shows you don't let yourself be controlled by social conventions. That's a valuable quality in the business world. Evelyn offered to invest $300,000 in exchange for 15% of the company. It was a generous offer, but it still wasn't enough. The second meeting was with Arthur Blackwood, an investor known for betting on technology and innovation companies. Natural and sustainable products are the future, he said, especially if you can expand into the national online market. I can invest $200,000 for 10% of the company. With both investments, Catherine would have $500,000, exactly what she needed to buy out her father's share, but it would mean giving up 25% of the company she had built from scratch. Is this the right thing to do? She asked Christopher that night. It's a difficult decision. You'll lose some control of the company, but you'll gain total independence from your family. Besides, with the investments, you'll be able to expand much faster than you could on your own. What if the investors try to control me like my father did? Based on the structure of the contracts Margaret proposed, you keep majority control, and unlike your family, the investors are interested in profit, not in controlling your personal life. On Thursday, Catherine signed the contracts with both investors. On Friday, she transferred $500,000 to Gregory Miller and officially became the sole owner of Pure Essence Corp. "How do you feel?" Christopher asked as they left the notary's office where the transfer had been finalized. "Free," Catherine answered. "For the first time in my life, completely free." They went to celebrate at a simple restaurant Christopher suggested, very different from the sophisticated places Catherine used to frequent. But the food was delicious and the atmosphere was welcoming. "Thank you," she said during dinner. "For what?" "For supporting me in this decision, for not trying to talk me out of it when I wanted to stand up to my family, for showing me that I can trust someone. Thank you for including me in your life, for giving me a chance to start over, because he treats me like a partner, not like a charity case." They toasted with cheap wine that tasted better than any champagne Catherine had ever had. When they got home, they found a surprise waiting for them. Eleanor Harrison was sitting in the lobby of the building, her eyes red from crying. "Mom," Catherine approached carefully, "what are you doing here?" "I came to ask for forgiveness," Eleanor said, standing up, "and to meet my son-in-law." Christopher extended his hand politely. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harrison." "The pleasure is mine, Christopher, and please call me Eleanor." They went up to the apartment where Eleanor explained her change of heart. "After you left and Gregory came home with those papers, I started thinking about everything that had happened, and I realized I was being exactly like my own mother was with me when I was young." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked. "My mother never approved of your father. She thought he was too ambitious, that he wanted to marry me for the family's money. She made my life a living hell until I chose between them. I chose your father and I don't regret it. But I lost years of my relationship with my family because of it." Eleanor turned to Christopher. "I don't know you, Christopher, but I can see how my daughter has changed since she married you. She seems more confident, more determined, happier. If you're responsible for that, then I'm grateful. Your daughter didn't need me to be strong, Eleanor. She was always strong. Maybe she just needed someone who recognized that. And you? Are you happy with her?" Christopher looked at Catherine. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again." Eleanor stayed for dinner, and for the first time in years, Catherine had a genuine conversation with her mother. They talked about dreams, fears, expectations, and all the misunderstandings that had piled up over the years. "Your father won't change his mind so easily," Eleanor warned. "His pride is deeply wounded." "I understand, Mom, but I can't live my life trying to protect his pride." "I know, and I'm not asking you to do that. I just want you to know that no matter what happens with him, you'll always have my support." When Eleanor left, Christopher and Catherine sat on the couch, emotionally exhausted. "Your mother seems like a good person," Christopher commented. "She is. She just got lost for a while, trying to keep the peace between everyone. I think she forgot that sometimes real peace requires conflict first. And your father. It's going to take time, maybe years, but at least now I know where the boundaries are." They spent the rest of the night talking about the future. With the new investments, Catherine's company could expand significantly. Christopher could officially work as an engineering consultant, maybe even start his own company again someday. "Have you ever thought about having children?" Christopher asked during a pause in the conversation. Catherine was surprised by the question. "Children? Honestly, not much. I always figured I'd have kids eventually, but it was never a priority." "What about you? Do you want more children?" "I'd like that. Matthew and Jennifer are already adults, and I missed many important years of their lives because of my problems. It would be nice to have a second chance at being a present father from the start. And do you think we'd be good parents together? I think you'd be an incredible mother. You're strong, smart, caring, everything a child would need." Catherine felt a strange warmth imagining a family with Christopher. It was something she'd never seriously considered before, but now it seemed possible. "It's too early for us to think about that," she said finally. "We're still learning to be husband and wife." "I agree, but it's good to know we're thinking in the same direction." A month after the wedding, they had settled into a comfortable routine. Christopher worked part-time at Catherine's company and part-time developing independent projects. Catherine was focused on expanding the business with the new investments. Their relationship had evolved from initial awkwardness to genuine companionship. They weren't a passionate couple in the traditional sense, but there was mutual respect, growing affection, and a solid partnership. That's when Alistair Sterling showed up again. He arrived at Catherine's office on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced. Alison tried to stop him, but he insisted he had important information that Catherine needed to know. "Alistair, what do you want?" Catherine asked as he entered her office. "I came to warn you about something important, about your husband. If you have something to say about Christopher, say it in front of him." Catherine called Christopher and asked him to come to her office. When Christopher arrived, Alistair looked at him with a barely disguised expression of superiority. "Christopher, right?" Alistair said. "Funny how a beggar manages to infiltrate high society." "If you came here to insult my husband, you can leave," Catherine said firmly. "Actually, I came to bring information you both should know. Christopher, you were very clever hiding your past, but I hired investigators." Christopher tensed up but said nothing. "What past?" Catherine asked. "Ask him about Helen Holloway. Ask him about what really happened with his company's money." Christopher went pale. "Alistair, stop. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do. Helen was your secretary, wasn't she? The married woman you had an affair with for years. The money your partner supposedly stole was used to support your double life with her." Catherine looked at Christopher, expecting an immediate denial, but he was silent, his face tense. "Christopher," she said softly. "It's true that I had a relationship with Helen," he said finally, "but it wasn't the way Alistair is describing it." "Of course it wasn't," Alistair said sarcastically. "It never is it? Alistair—" "Shut up!" Catherine shouted. "You ran out of our wedding ceremony, humiliated me in front of 400 people, and now you come here trying to destroy my marriage? Leave. Now." "Catherine, I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need your protection. I never did. Get out." Alistair left, but the damage was done. Catherine and Christopher stayed in silence in the room, the weight of the accusations hanging between them. "Do you want to tell me about Helen?" Catherine asked finally. "Yes, but not here. Let's go home." The drive back was tense. Christopher drove the car Catherine had bought for him, but his hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Catherine looked out the window, trying to process what she had just heard. At home they sat in the living room. Christopher took a deep breath before beginning. "Helen Holloway worked as a secretary at my company for 8 years. She was married to a man who treated her poorly, sometimes violently. For years our relationship was strictly professional." Catherine listened in silence. 5 years ago she showed up at the office with marks of abuse on her face. Her husband had been drinking and lost control. I helped her, took her to the hospital, offered legal support. And then? And then we grew close. She was vulnerable. I was having problems in my marriage with Samantha. We started a relationship that lasted 2 years. "Did you love her?" Christopher hesitated. "I thought I did. Looking back, I think we were 2 wounded people trying to find comfort in each other. And the money. I helped Helen financially a few times. I paid for lawyers for her divorce, helped with rent for an apartment, a few other things. But they were never large amounts, and it was always my money, not the company's." "How much in total?" "Maybe $15,000 over the 2 years. Alistair is exaggerating when he talks about maintaining a double life." Catherine processed the information. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I felt ashamed. I had an extramarital affair. I contributed to the end of my first marriage. I made mistakes. I didn't want you to think badly of me." "Christopher, we all have pasts. I didn't expect you to be perfect." "But you expected me to be honest." "Yes, I did." Christopher lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I should have told you from the start." Catherine was silent for a long moment. "What happened with Helen?" "She got the divorce and moved to Rio de Janeiro 3 years ago. She rebuilt her life there. I haven't had contact with her since." "Do you still love her?" "No. I don't think I ever really loved her. It was more emotional need than real love." "And Samantha never knew?" "She found out shortly before everything fell apart with the company. It was one of the reasons she had such an easy time blaming me for everything and asking for a divorce." Catherine stood up and walked to the window. "I need time to process this." "I understand." "Catherine, I know I broke your trust. If you want me to leave, I don't want you to leave, but I need some time to think." That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since the wedding. Catherine lay awake for hours, trying to decide how she felt about the day's revelations. On the one hand, Christopher had lied by omission about something important in his life. On the other hand, everyone had a right to privacy about past relationships. The question was, what else hadn't he told her? The next morning, Christopher made coffee as usual, but he was visibly nervous. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Not well. And you?" "Not well either." They had coffee in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Catherine spoke. "Christopher, I need to know if there's anything else important that you haven't told me." "There's nothing else, Catherine. Helen was the only serious relationship I had outside of marriage, and I've already told you everything about it. And debts, legal problems, other secrets? None. You know everything about my financial and legal situation. There are no more secrets." Catherine studied him carefully. There was something in the sincerity of his eyes that reassured her. "Okay. But I need you to understand something. Our marriage may have started in an unconventional way, but if we're going to make this work, it needs to be based on complete honesty. No more omissions." "You're right. And you? Is there anything I should know about you?" Catherine thought for a moment. "I had a few relationships before Alistair, but none was serious enough to mention. I don't have hidden debts. I don't have addictions. I don't have secret children. My life has been quite open." "And your feelings about our marriage?" "My feelings? Yes, you married me out of anger and pride. How do you feel now, a month later?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "Now I feel like I made the right decision for the wrong reasons. I don't regret marrying you, but I wish I had done it for more mature reasons. And now, what reasons would you have now? Now I would marry you because you're a good person, because you respect me and support me, because we're a good team, because I'm starting to truly care about you." Christopher smiled for the first time since Alistair's visit. "I'm also starting to truly care about you, Catherine, much more than I thought would be possible." "Then let's move forward. No more secrets, no more omissions. Deal?" "Deal." They hugged, and Catherine felt that there was a new solidity in their relationship. They had faced their first real crisis as a couple and come out stronger on the other side. 2 weeks later, they received more news about Alistair. The private investigator he had hired to look into Christopher had uncovered compromising information about Alistair himself. Alison brought the information to Catherine on a Monday morning. "Cat, you need to see this. That investigator Alistair hired, apparently he has a guilty conscience." "What do you mean?" "He came to me because he found out Alistair wasn't interested in the truth about Christopher. He was just looking for anything he could use to cause trouble between you two." Alison handed Catherine an envelope. "The investigator found out why Alistair really ran away from the wedding." Catherine opened the envelope and read the report. Her eyebrows rose as she read. "Christopher, you need to see this," she said, handing him the document. Christopher read it in silence, and his expression shifted from curiosity to outrage. "He planned all of it?" Christopher asked. "According to this, yes. Alistair found out my family was having serious financial problems weeks before the wedding. Instead of telling me, he decided to use the information to get back at my family over some old business dispute with my father." The report detailed how Alistair had orchestrated his own escape from the wedding, calculating that the public humiliation would destroy the Miller family's reputation and hurt their business. "But he didn't count on me marrying someone else on the spot," Catherine continued. "When I did that, I turned his humiliation into a curious story about me. That's why he came back trying to regain control of the situation. And the compromising photos he claimed existed. They were fake, created by him to have a plausible excuse to flee." Christopher shook his head in disbelief. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind of person I almost married," Catherine replied. "The kind of person my family thought was perfect for me. That afternoon, Alistair showed up at the office once again, but this time Catherine was ready for him. "Alistair, what a coincidence. I was just wanting to talk to you." "Catherine, I came to apologize for the way I approached the situation yesterday. Maybe I was too aggressive. Oh, you were aggressive, that's for sure. But that's not what I want to talk about. Catherine placed the investigator's report on the desk. I want to talk about this. Alistair looked at the document and went pale. Where did you get this? Your own investigator brought it to me. Seems he has more ethics than you do. Catherine, I can explain. No need to explain. It's all very clear here. You plan to humiliate me publicly to get revenge for business disagreements with my father. You forged photos to have an excuse to run. You turned our wedding into an instrument of personal vengeance. Alistair tried to speak, but Catherine cut him off. And when your plans didn't work out the way you expected, you hired investigators to try to destroy my new marriage. Not out of love, not out of protection, but because you can't accept that I'm happy without you. Catherine, Alistair, I want you to understand something very clearly. If you come near me, my husband, my company, or my family again, I will sue you for defamation, harassment, and every other legal charge my lawyer can come up with, and I'll make sure this report reaches every newspaper in the city. You can't prove any of that. Yes, I can. Your own investigator is willing to testify. Besides, do you really think I didn't back everything up before confronting you? Alistair looked at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out without saying another word. Catherine knew she wouldn't see him again. How do you feel? Christopher asked when Alistair left. Vindicated and free. For the first time, truly free from all the people who tried to control my life. That night, they celebrated with a bottle of cheap wine and pizza delivery. It was a strange combination, but perfect for their unconventional relationship. Can I make a confession? Catherine said when they were relaxing on the couch. Of course. I'm starting to fall in love with you. Christopher almost choked on his wine. Really? Really? It's not the crazy passion you see in the movies. It's something more solid, more real. You make me feel safe and respected. You make me want to be a better person. Christopher set his wineglass on the table and turned to her. I'm falling in love with you too, Catherine. You gave me back my dignity when I thought I had lost it forever. You made me believe I can start over. So now what? What do we do with these feelings? Now we stop pretending we're just companions of convenience and admit that we're a real couple. They kissed for the first time with real intimacy. It wasn't the shy kiss from the wedding ceremony, nor the polite kiss from the first few weeks. It was the kiss of two people who had deliberately chosen to build a life together. I think we should renew our vows, Christopher said as they pulled apart. Why? Because when we got married, we were running away from something. Now we're running towards something. It's different. Where would you like to renew your vows? Somewhere simple. Maybe on a beach or in a garden, with just a few people who truly care about us. Your kids, my kids, your mother, a few close friends. A small ceremony, but full of real love. Catherine smiled. I would love that. 3 months after the original wedding, they organized a vow renewal ceremony at an inn in Aspen. It was a simple but beautiful place surrounded by mountains and blooming gardens. Matthew and Jennifer traveled from Chicago to be there. Eleanor was there, radiant with joy. Allison came with her husband. A few co-workers of theirs attended as well. The total was 20 people, but the atmosphere had an intimacy and authenticity that the original ceremony had lacked. Christopher wore a simple but elegant suit. Catherine chose a short, uncomplicated white dress, very different from the elaborate wedding gown the first time around. Father Thomas, the same priest who had celebrated the original wedding, agreed to officiate the renewal. He seemed much more relaxed this time. Catherine and Christopher, he said during the ceremony, when I first saw you at this altar, I confess I doubted the wisdom of your decision. Today, I see a couple who turned an impulsive decision into true love through hard work, honesty, and mutual commitment. The vows they wrote were simple but profound. Christopher, Catherine said, you taught me that true courage isn't being unafraid. It's making the right decisions despite the fear. I promise to keep choosing you every day, not out of desperation or anger, but out of love and respect. Catherine, Christopher replied, you showed me that second chances exist, but only for those who are willing to work to deserve them. I promise to be the man you deserve every day for the rest of our life together." When Father Thomas declared them husband and wife once again, the kiss was unlike anything they had shared before. It was the kiss of two people who had consciously chosen to build a life together. The celebration was simple but joyful. Matthew gave a heartfelt speech about how rewarding it was to see his father happy again. Jennifer cried tears of joy. Eleanor said she was proud of her daughter's courage. "You know," Alison said to Catherine during the celebration, "when you first got married, I thought you had completely lost your mind. And now? Now, I think it was the most sensible thing you've ever done. You two are perfect together." As Christopher talked with his children, Catherine watched the scene. 6 months ago, she had been about to marry a man who didn't truly love her, to please a family that tried to control her life. Now she was married to a man who deeply respected her and who had become her best friend as well as her husband. "What are you thinking about?" Christopher asked as he approached her. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst decisions we make lead us to the best places." "Do you regret anything?" Catherine looked around the simple party, filled with people who truly cared about them. "The only thing I regret is not having had the courage to make decisions like this sooner." 6 months after the renewal of their vows, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. "How do you feel about it?" Christopher asked when she told him the news. "Surprised, nervous, but happy, truly happy. And you?" "Ecstatic. Catherine, we're going to have a real family." "We already have a real family." "You're right, but now it's going to get bigger." Catherine's pregnancy progressed without complications. Christopher became even more attentive, if that was possible. He read books on parenting, took childbirth preparation classes, and planned changes to the apartment to accommodate the baby. Matthew and Jennifer were thrilled at the prospect of having a half-brother or half-sister. They started visiting New York City more often, and Catherine developed a genuinely affectionate relationship with both young people. "You're a cool stepmother," Jennifer said during one of the visits. "Nothing like that evil fairy tale thing." "You two are cool stepkids too," Catherine replied. "Nothing like that resentful soap opera thing." Catherine's company continued to grow with the investments. Christopher had become a minority partner and director of expansion. His engineering projects were allowing the company to grow sustainably and efficiently. Evelyn Vance and Arthur Blackwood, the original investors, were impressed with the return on their investments. Both expressed interest in financing an even larger expansion of the company. "You two make an impressive team," Arthur commented during a meeting. "Catherine has the business vision and Christopher has the execution ability. It's a powerful combination." Gregory Miller finally approached his daughter when she was 6 months pregnant. He showed up at the apartment on a Sunday afternoon, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "Dad," Catherine said as she opened the door, "may I come in? I'd like to talk to you and Christopher." They sat down in the living room. Gregory seemed to have aged years in the months since they had grown apart. "I came to ask for forgiveness," he said finally. "For both of you." Christopher and Catherine exchanged surprised looks. "Dad," "Let me finish, Catherine. I made terrible mistakes. I tried to control your life because I was afraid of losing you. Ironically, I ended up losing you precisely because I tried to control it." He turned to Christopher. "Christopher, I apologize for the insults and the disrespect. You've proven to be a better man than I ever gave you credit for. You've taken good care of my daughter, made her happy, and you clearly, truly love her." "Thank you, Mr. Miller. That means a lot to me to hear. Please, call me Gregory. We're family, after all." Gregory hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I'd like to meet my grandchild when he or she is born, if you'll allow me." Catherine felt her eyes fill with tears. "Of course, Dad. This child is going to need their grandfather." "And their grandmother too," Eleanor said, appearing at the door. "Sorry, I was in the car waiting to see how the conversation went. The family came together for the first time in nearly a year. The wounds weren't completely healed, but the healing process had begun. Mary Jane Miller was born on a spring morning, weighing 7 pounds, 1 ounce. She was a healthy and perfect baby, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's nose. Christopher cried when he held his daughter for the first time. "Hello, my little princess," he whispered. "Daddy is going to take very good care of you." Catherine watched her husband with their daughter and felt her heart overflow with love. This man, whom she had met under the worst circumstances, had become the center of her life. Matthew and Jennifer arrived from Chicago the same day. Matthew had gotten a promotion at work and was considering moving to New York City to be closer to the family. Jennifer was in her final year of college and was already talking about doing her graduate studies in New York City as well. "She's perfect," Jennifer said, holding her half-sister, "and she has such tiny little fingers." "Welcome to the family, Mary Jane," Matthew said. "You have a crazy family, but one that loves you very much." Gregory and Eleanor took turns holding their granddaughter, both visibly moved. All the past conflicts and resentments seemed insignificant in the face of the new life that had arrived. "Thank you," Christopher said to Catherine when they were alone in the hospital room. "For what this time? For giving me a family. For giving me a chance to be a father again. For turning my life into something I never thought would be possible. Christopher, you did the same thing for me. You gave me the courage to live my own life. You showed me what a real relationship is. You taught me that love can be built on respect and partnership, not just blind passion." "Do you think Mary Jane will grow up thinking our love story is strange?" "I think she'll grow up knowing that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected decisions, and that courage is making a decision and then working to make it right." 2 years later, Christopher had founded his own engineering company once again, this time as the majority partner in a joint project with Catherine's company. They were building a social housing complex that integrated sustainability concepts with real community needs. Catherine continued expanding her cosmetics company, but now with a focus on products that created jobs for underserved communities. It was an approach that combined her business interests with social purpose. Mary Jane was growing up surrounded by love from all sides. She had 2 older siblings who adored her, grandparents who spoiled her, and parents who had built a solid marriage based on mutual respect and shared goals. "Sometimes I wonder," Christopher said one night while putting Mary Jane to bed, "what would have happened if Alistair hadn't run away that day?" "I would have married a man who didn't love me, had an unhappy life and never met you," Catherine replied. "So I'm grateful to him for running away." "Do you really believe that destiny brought us together?" "I don't believe in destiny, Christopher. I believe in choices. Alistair chose to run away. I chose to call you, you chose to accept. And ever since then, every day we choose to stay together and build this life. That's much more powerful than destiny." "You're right." Christopher kissed his sleeping daughter on the forehead. "Good night, my little princess. Dream of beautiful things." They left the baby's room and headed to their own room. 3 years after that impulsive and scandalous wedding, they had built exactly the kind of life they both wanted. A loving family, prosperous careers that made a difference in other people's lives, and a relationship based on trust and partnership. "Christopher?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For agreeing to marry me on that crazy day. Thank you for choosing me." They kissed, and Catherine thought about how incredible it was that one of the worst experiences of her life had turned into the best decision she had ever made. Outside, New York City continued its bustling nightlife. But inside that apartment, a family built under unlikely circumstances slept peacefully, secure in the love they had chosen to build together. Mary Jane turned 2 on a bright, sunny day. The party was held in the garden of the new house Christopher and Catherine had bought in Greenwich, a place with room for Mary Jane to play, and to host the extended family they had built over the years. Matthew had moved to New York City permanently and worked as an engineer at Christopher's company. Jennifer had finished her psychology degree and started a master's in family therapy, inspired by seeing how unconventional families could work perfectly well. "Aunt Jen!" Mary Jane screamed when she saw Jennifer arriving with a gift wrapped in colorful paper. "Hi, sweetheart." Jennifer picked her up. "How's my favorite little princess?" "Look, Aunt Jen." Mary Jane showed a drawing she had made. "It's our family." On the paper, there were stick figures representing all the important people in her life. Mommy, Daddy, Big Brother Matthew, Big Sister Jennifer, Grandpa Gregory, Grandma Eleanor, and even Alison, whom Mary Jane considered an honorary aunt. "Our family is pretty big, isn't it?" Jennifer said. "Yes, and I like it that way." Christopher watched the scene from the porch of the house, holding a cup of coffee. Catherine approached him from behind and wrapped her arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking that 5 years ago, I was a man who had lost everything and slept on the streets. Today I have a wife I love, a beautiful daughter, a thriving company, and a family that fully accepts me. Sometimes it's hard to believe this is real. It's real because we work to make it real, every single day." "And you? Any regrets?" Catherine looked at Mary Jane playing with her cousins, Gregory animatedly chatting with Matthew about an engineering project, Jennifer helping Eleanor in the kitchen, Alison organizing the gifts with her husband. "The only regret I have is taking so long to understand that true happiness doesn't come from following the script others wrote for us. It comes from having the courage to write our own script, even if that script seems crazy to everyone else. Especially when it seems crazy to everyone else." The party continued until late afternoon. When everyone had left and Mary Jane finally fell asleep, Christopher and Catherine sat on the porch of their new house, looking at the stars. "Do you want another child?" Christopher asked suddenly. "I've been thinking about it. Mary Jane would be an amazing big sister. And we have the space now, the financial stability, and more importantly, we have enough love for one more child." They sat in silence for a few minutes, just enjoying the peace of the night. "Christopher?" "Yes?" "Do you remember what you said that first night, about having hope again?" "I remember. You kept your promise. You became useful again, built a new family, started your life over. I'm proud of you." "And do you remember what you said about proving you could make your own decisions?" "I remember. You not only proved it, but you inspired other people to do the same. Our story is helping people find the courage to make difficult changes in their own lives." It was true. Their story had been told in several magazines and television shows, always focusing on the message that second chances are possible and that unconventional families can be just as solid as traditional ones. "Do you know what impresses me the most about our story?" Catherine said. "What?" "It started with anger and ended with love. It started with despair and ended with hope. It began with 2 wounded people and ended with an entire family healed. And what do you think our daughter will think when she's old enough to understand how we met? I think she'll learn that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments, and that real courage is choosing love even when it's scary." Christopher took Catherine's hand and intertwined their fingers. "You know I love you, don't you?" "I know, and you know I love you too. Even after everything we've been through, all the hardships, all the judgment, all the madness, especially because of everything we've been through. Easy love doesn't last, Christopher. The love that survives the storms is the one that's worth it." They kissed under the stars, in the garden of the home they had built together, surrounded by the life they had chosen to create. From Mary Jane's room, a soft baby cry came. It wasn't a cry of pain or fear, just a child who had woken up and wanted her parents. "I'll go get her," Christopher said, getting up. "Let's go together." They entered the room where Mary Jane was sitting in her crib, rubbing her eyes with her tiny hands. "Mommy? Daddy?" she said when she saw them. "We're here, my love," Catherine said, picking her up. "I dreamed about our family," Mary Jane said, nestling against her mother. "Was it a good dream?" Christopher asked. "It was. We were all together and everyone was happy." "That wasn't a dream, my princess," Catherine said softly. "That's our real life." Mary Jane smiled and closed her eyes again, safe in her parents' arms. Christopher and Catherine placed her back in the crib and stood watching her sleep for a few minutes. It was impossible not to think about how drastically their lives had changed since that day at church. "Ready to go to sleep?" Christopher asked Catherine. "Ready." They went back to their bedroom, where they got ready for sleep as they had done every night for 5 years. It was a simple routine, but full of the intimacy and affection they had carefully cultivated over time. Before falling asleep, Catherine once again thought about how grateful she was that Alistair had run away that day. If he hadn't run away, she would never have met Christopher, never have discovered what a real relationship was, never have had Mary Jane, never have built the wonderful family that was now the center of her life. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things in disguise. Sometimes being left at the altar is exactly what we need to find the right person. And sometimes marrying a complete stranger on impulse is the most sensible decision a person can make. The end. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching us from. Do you believe Catherine made the right decision when she impulsively married Christopher? Do you think relationships built under such unusual circumstances can actually work? Leave your opinion in the comments with honest words. We'd love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.